I'm Strikadelic, but you can call me Ludo. Welcome to my hyperfixation diary.
Guys, I went so hard with the French Canadian thing in the last video that I went to go watch YouTube today and they served me a Canadian Tire ad in French. And then they made me do one of those surveys at the end that's like, do you strongly agree or strongly disagree that this ad applies to you? And it's like, dude, I'm from Sudbury. It depends on what part of town I'm in. No, we are not going to be talking about any products from Canadian Tire in this video. This video is my best of the best of 2022 beauty edition, but specifically this is going to be my base and cheek products. Eye products and lip products are going to be their own video, but I do just want to poll the audience really quick. So I am into single shadows, and that's most of what I used this year, like indie single shadows, multi-chromes, sparkles, stuff from like small independent brands. Do you think that should go in its own separate video, or should that go in the eyes and lips video? It depends on what you guys would like, because I know some people who really like palettes don't necessarily care about singles, and then some people who are really into building their own palettes with singles don't really care about pre-made palettes. And then there's also going to be the lip products. So I don't want it to be like too much of a jumbled video. If you think the indies should go in their own video and you'd prefer to have that as like a reference point to go back to when you're indie shopping, let me know. But in this video, we're going to be talking about foundation, concealer, blushes, bronzers, highlighters, and I just want to do a quick touch base on what we are working with here, because that certainly affects what products I end up liking and whether my recommendations are going to work for you. So if I had like a yearly recap, like a Spotify wrap for my skin, which I kind of do because I went back and rewatched every single one of my archived Instagram stories from 2022. If you don't follow me on Instagram yet, you should. I'm way more fun over there. My skin, however, was not having fun this year. So throughout the first half of the year, I was dealing with very dehydrated, textured, dull, like really unhappy skin. I had a lot of stress, acne, and I was also living in an apartment that had some mold problems. I was having a lot of flare-ups of very painful, red, just like inflamed, cracked, peeling skin around my nose, my eyelids. It was very like flaky. I'm gonna stick a picture on the screen of what it looked like at its worst, because that's probably easier than trying to explain it. But if you don't want to look at that, then I will just do a little countdown and then I will tell you when it's gone. So 3, 2, 1, here we go. And it's gone. So I'm not actually sure if that was facial psoriasis or seborrheic dermatitis, but I ended up switching up some stuff in my skincare routine. I moved out of that apartment and it's pretty much gone now. It's managed. So around the start of August is when I had that mostly under control, and then I ended up with more of a combination skin type, which I feel like historically is what my skin wants to do. Ever since I exited puberty, I've pretty much had combo skin most of the time. Oily T-zone, clogged pores, and like dry around some areas. And then right now my skin is going through some more changes because as of like 6 or 7 weeks ago, I am back on weekly testosterone injections. So my skin has been reacting to that, and I'm very oily, I'm very greasy. My pores are huge. So that's what I'm dealing with now and going forward until my skin decides to even out. For coloring, I'm going to quickly explain that because in this video I'm going to be recommending specific shades of like blush and bronzer, and I feel like it is important to understand what my shade and undertones are, and I know that a lot of people specifically look for beauty advice from people who have similar coloring to them. So for coloring, I have fair skin, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself to be pale because I don't usually have a problem finding a foundation shade in most ranges. I just end up being like the first or second shade dependent on undertone, but I'm not usually like excluded from those shade ranges based on the tone of my skin. For most of my life, I thought I had a cool undertone, but turns out I was just vitamin deficient. So after making some lifestyle changes, I can gladly inform you that I have an undertone that is just straight down the middle of neutral. My undertone can reasonably be compared to my mom's Performance Fabric Micro Suede beige couch that she purchased in 2006. I did work in retail beauty for a couple of years, so I've tried just about every high-end to mid-range concealer, tinted moisturizer, and foundation that came out from like 2017 to 2020 or existed between those years. So if that's easier for you to gauge off of, I can confidently let you know that I'm a Fenty 120 or 150. 120 is a better shade match, but 150 is a better undertone match because it's neutral. I am an NW10 in MAC last time I checked, and in Estee Lauder Double Wear I wear 1N0. And now that you've sat through the equivalent of a cutscene from hell, you unlock the level where I tell you what foundation I like to wear. This certainly isn't comprehensive to everything I loved this year. This was hard to put together actually because I didn't post my 2021 favorites anywhere. I usually post my makeup favorites on my Instagram at the end of the year, but I didn't do that last year because I was too depressed. So whether these products were used more in 2021 or 2022 got a little bit muddled, but I really tried to narrow it down to the best of the best. So that's things that I used all year long, favorites that I tried for the first time this year, and I know that I tried them for the first time this year, or anything that I spent like a significant amount of time revisiting and falling in love with again. If I couldn't put it down, it's in here. And for this video, I stuck with products that are all still currently available to my knowledge, because I'm going to make a separate video of all of my fallen angels, my discontinued faves of 2022. Dude, if you sat through this intro, I hope you find $10 on the ground today. Let's get into these products. You know what? After editing that intro footage, I'm going to raise that to $20 because, oh boy, fibromyalgia fog is one hell of a drug, isn't it? That guy couldn't even get a sentence out. So I guess we're kind of learning together that I'm not going to be able to film a lot of videos in one sitting, just due to physical stuff, mental stuff, people coming home unexpectedly, yada yada. I don't know. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the costume changes. Maybe you can even vote down below in the comments whether you enjoyed outfit 1 or 2, or even possibly 3. We'll see how this goes. I did come here with the intention of talking about makeup though, so for my very first complexion favorite of 2022, whoa, this is the Wet n Wild Glass Correct Primer in green. And I mentioned this in my drugstore video too, so I might be repeating myself a little bit here if you've watched that video. I used this a lot throughout 2022. I would say this is my most used primer. I have pretty much gone through this tube here, but this is the first and only tube I've purchased. This was just a really great, simple, flattering base for when my skin was more dry or irritated. It didn't do a ton of color correcting, but it did even out the skin tone overall. It didn't look pasty, like how some color correctors can almost kind of just curdle over spots with that green pigment. This didn't do that. It just gave the skin a really nice, healthy sheen and a bit of evening out. I would say Glass Correct is a very good name for this product because it does give you that glass skin sort of effect. I would wear this and just concealer sometimes and it looked fine. I did use this today for the sake of wearing some of my favorites on my face for the video, but I don't think I'm going to be reaching for this much going forward because I don't find it to be very balancing. It doesn't really do anything for oil, and it also doesn't do anything to camouflage larger pores. So my skin's needs have changed to the point where this isn't the best product for me anymore. But if you have normal to dry skin with maybe even some flaky patches or just generalized redness, I think this would work really well for you, and it's under $10. That was the only notable primer I could think of to talk about, which means we can move on to concealer. So this is the NYX Bear With Me Serum Concealer. You've probably heard lots of people talk about it. It went viral on TikTok, I think, and then trickled its way over to YouTube, Instagram. So I have two shades. I have Fair and Vanilla, and I mix them 50-50. The only reason I have two shades is because I bought Vanilla because it was actually in stock, and then Fair came back in stock, so I bought that too. This is a bit too light, this is a bit too deep, so I mixed the two. Apparently there's another shade that would work better for me, so I'm thinking about getting that. Anyways, this is just a good everyday concealer. I really like the consistency of this because it is definitely a serum concealer without being too watery, thin, or oily. There's still a little bit of emollients to it, definitely, but it holds its own. It's not going to separate or curdle on your skin like I find a lot of serum products from the drugstore tend to do, where they just kind of particulate and then sit in your pores after as whatever serum kind of sinks into your skin and the pigment stays left on top. This doesn't do that. It just gives you that really good dewy, glass skin, healthy kind of look. And I have a bit of a confession to make. I am something of a Complexion Bartender. I love a good base cocktail. It's something I picked up while I was doing freelance and professional makeup artistry. I would just kind of mix whatever I wanted to get wherever I needed to go as far as the complexion went. Anyways, that is basically all to say that I used this less as a straight up concealer and more as a foundation mixer. I loved mixing this with tinted moisturizer because normally you try and mix a concealer with a tinted moisturizer to give it more coverage and they fight each other because the tinted moisturizer is more emollient, the concealer is more pigmented and more has a bit more of its own dry down. And this behaves like if you took the formulation of a tinted moisturizer and made it into a quite pigmented concealer. So mixing the two gives me my perfect foundation. I obviously don't expect anybody to pick this up just to mix it with tinted moisturizer, especially because they're like $17 Canadian a tube. But if you have it, you're struggling to find a way to use it because it's a little too emollient for your under eyes, try mixing it in with a tinted moisturizer that you don't find gives you enough coverage, and you might really like that. So while that might not be everybody's preference or starting point, I find it to be a way of MacGyvering my makeup routine in a way that I find really enjoyable. But then again, one of my nicknames growing up was HM, which stands for high maintenance. So that was my runner-up concealer for 2022, but now we get to talk about my favorite, which is the Wet n Wild Megalast Incognito All Day Full Coverage Concealer. And this is just such a great full coverage concealer that works no matter what my skin is doing. It is more full glam. I wouldn't necessarily wear it without foundation, but I have worn it with just powder foundation over it, and it looks fine like that. It doesn't settle into fine lines. It has enough coverage to not make my dark circles look gray, even when they're really blue-purple. The edges blend out pretty nicely. It doesn't look dry over spots, and it actually blurs pores a little bit too. It's just a really, really good all-rounder. I would recommend it for just about any skin type. It is pretty much flawless. The only caveat I have is that it blends out a lot better with a sponge than a brush, but it blends out so beautifully with a sponge. And I use a sponge 99% of the time anyway, that I don't really care. I emptied one of these in 2022, and then I repurchased a new tube last month, and it just feels so great to have a new tube. This is the best full coverage concealer on the market that I have tried. Any of those other full coverage concealers you've been seeing go viral, like the Sephora Collection Best Skin Ever, I have that. Does not hold a freaking candle to this. And I have mine in the shade Fair Beige. Let's move on to foundations. I only have one liquid foundation because my favorite tinted moisturizer just got discontinued. So that's going to be in my Fallen Angels video. But my most used traditional liquid foundation of 2022 was the Shiseido Synchro Skin Self-Refreshing Foundation. And I have mine in the shade 130 Opal. Similar to those NYX concealers, this gets in on a bit of a technicality because I did use the absolute pants off this, but I mostly mixed it with other products. There were a couple of like glowy products I mixed it with, and I would sometimes mix it with the NYX concealers if I wanted it to be a bit more dewy. And sometimes I would mix it with another foundation that was a little bit of a better shade, and then sometimes I would mix it with my tinted moisturizer to give it a bit more of a forgiving texture when my skin was really pissed off. Let me tell you what I do like about this foundation though, because I have worn it on its own quite a few times. It just wasn't my typical use case of it throughout the year. So this is an oil-free satin finish foundation with SPF 30. It really does have its own natural dry down. It doesn't stay molten or soupy or like re-liquefy on your face throughout the day if you get a bit oily, but it also doesn't settle into lines or kind of particulate over spots if you're dry. It doesn't dry you out throughout the day, or at least it didn't for me when my skin was feeling really parched and I still wore this. So the lasting power on this is great. It really is self-refreshing. I would say it maxes out at about 18 hours of wear before I feel like I need to take it off, but it's only at around hour 15 or 16 where any of my oil would start to peek through. Another thing I really like about this is that it is so perfecting and blurring. It creates that perfected canvas for you. It's not full coverage. I would say this is like medium buildable to full coverage, but since that finish is so beautiful and just naturally perfected and flattering on the skin, it's almost like you don't need that extra pigment. The shade Opal isn't my perfect match. It is my closest match in the foundations. It's just a little bit dark and a little bit yellow, but I can definitely get away with it. And I am really looking forward to using this more on its own in 2023, especially because my skin's a bit more oily now and it'll be able to handle this formulation more on its own. I would say this foundation is probably best suited to normal, combo, and oily skin types, but Shiseido does have a very similar foundation geared for drier skin types. I believe it's called the Synchro Skin Naturally Radiant or something like that. I can throw a picture on the screen. So that was my liquid foundation, and now I have a powder foundation to talk about. This is one that I will use as an actual powder foundation, so over just concealer or just primer or just moisturizer, even on its own if I'm really in a rush. But I also use it as a setting powder for my liquid foundations or tinted moisturizers most of the time. I just find the finish to be so flattering, more flattering than any other powder I've tried, that I just use it for pretty much everything. I even use it for blurring out the edges of my eyeshadow and setting my eye primer. So if you've known me for any length of time through YouTube, Instagram, in real life, you will know which powder I am talking about, and that is the Makeup Forever Matte Velvet Skin Powder. I wear the shade R210. I am wearing this on top of my foundation today, and this has been my favorite powder and basically only powder that I love for the past 4 years running. This was released in spring 2019, and I've been loving it ever since. It is the perfect powder, okay? It gives coverage and blur at the same time, but it's never heavy. It's never heavy, it's never drying, it's just blurring. It glides over the skin and conceals whatever the heck you want it to, or sets whatever the heck you want it to. And oh, it's so perfect. It's so perfect. So I've used this powder every single time I've done my makeup for the past 4 years, and I would be so lost without it. If I had to shop for a new powder foundation in 2022 that would be as good as this, I'd be so lost. And like I said, this spring, this powder will have its 5-year anniversary, and it has so far withstood all of the dewy, all of the glass skin, all of the gym face, blah, blah, blah trends that we have been seeing coming out of TikTok. This is a matte full coverage powder foundation, and I have been scared for my life whenever this goes on sale. This went on sale on Cyber Monday on Sephora for 50% off, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm dead. I'm dead. My shade was showing as out of stock online, and then I looked at the options for pickup in store, and pretty much every shade was showing as sold out of stock at my local Sephora. I went and checked on the Hudson's Bay website because they're the only other Makeup Forever retailer listed for Canada, and Makeup Forever's website doesn't actually ship to Canada. Hudson's Bay didn't have it on sale, but every shade was out of stock. I was panicking because I don't actually have a backup of this right now. This was my backup, and look where we are. So I want to give a shout out to my beloved soulmate of a long distance friend, Era, who went and tracked one of these down. She took the subway after her class, took the midnight train going to any Sephora in Washington, D.C., found one of these in my shade. It was the last one on the shelf. She was like asking the cast member about whether it was discontinued or not, or whether it would be coming back in stock. And she's like relaying all of the answers to me. She's updating me throughout this whole thing. Like, do you think it's going to be okay if I just put it in my backpack wrapped up in the bag? Like, it won't break, right? And she's going to mail it to me when we do our little Christmas exchange. Like, she was on a mission. That was one of the most considerate and lovely and surprising things that anyone has ever done for me. And she didn't have to do that at all. So thank you, Era. This did go back to full price and come back in stock online after. So I'm not sure if it's actually being discontinued. I don't think it is. I really hope it's not. But still, that just... you're so sweet. Thank you, Era. So the Makeup Forever is my holy grail powder, but I do have a powder honorable mention, and that is the Quo Beauty Radiant Setting Powder. And this isn't really a setting powder, it is a finishing powder. If you haven't seen this product yet, it's probably because Quo is Shoppers Drug Mart's proprietary like store brand, so you can only get this in Canada. So this is a more recent purchase, and I initially purchased this finishing powder because it has a soft radiance to it, and I thought it might actually make a nice subtle highlighter for days where I wasn't wearing a lot of makeup. I didn't find that to be the case, and so I shelved this for a bit, but then I used it a couple more times as a finishing powder, and it really snuck up and surprised me, hence why I wanted to give it the honorable mention. So what I do with this powder is I will set my base first with the Makeup Forever powder, and then I will apply all of my cheek products, my blush, contour, highlighter, and then I will dust a little bit of this over my face with a fluffy brush. And I try to focus on the high points of the face where I would want a bit more blurring or radiance, but I'm not super precise with it. And then I go in with setting spray. And then this makes everything look so perfected, especially in pictures. This shade itself, this is the lightest shade, and it comes in 3 shades. It's a little stark white when I first apply it, but then after I wear it for about 20 minutes and after I hit it with that setting spray, it starts to really mesh with my foundation and concealer, and it just gives them this very flawless, lit from within glow. It looks healthy and radiant, but not dewy or glossy. What really cemented this as a favorite for me this year was the time I used it with a foundation that I really was not a fan of the appearance of. I had tried it a couple times and it just looked so off. I last ditch put a bit of this on top of it and then went to go take a picture and it looked perfect. And I had tried that foundation before and still experienced the same issues with the appearance of it. So I can really attribute the fact that it looked really nice on camera and then looked really nice in person too, straight to this powder. I used to use the Hourglass ambient lighting powders on my clients all the time whenever I needed to fix something or make it look a bit more flawless, and I would venture to say that this is the closest dupe I've found to those, and it's drugstore. So I am really excited to keep using the Quo Radiant setting powder next year. So those were my base products, and now we get to move on to the cheek products. Let's go. So my favorite contour is one that I wanted for so long, before you could even get it easily in Canada. And before I could even reasonably afford it. I mean, it's $64, but you will pry it from my cold dead hands. And that is the Westman Atelier Face Trace Contour Stick in the shade Biscuit. The gender euphoria that this product gives me. It just works. It sculpts my face perfectly. The shade is not too cool. Like, I could get away wearing this without a bronzer, but it's also not so warm that it looks orange. If it were, I wouldn't be using it or recommending it to you. This blends so easily, but it's not greasy or too silicone-y. It's just this beautiful, sumptuous, blendable texture, and it's got the perfect degree of pigment. If the Fenty matchsticks are like a full coverage, full glam contour, this will still make you look snatched, but it's more of a medium coverage contour. I can apply this on any face of makeup. Sometimes I'll do just concealer and this. I will use this for full glam and everything in between. I don't think I'd be capable of coming up with a more perfect contour product for me specifically if I tried. It genuinely feels like this was made for me. Perfection. But if you are looking for a good cream contour or bronzer at the drugstore, e.l.f. has got you covered, baby. This is the Putty bronzer, and I have mine in the shade Tan Lines. So this is a thinner formula than the Westman Atelier. It's not as creamy, but it still blends out like a charm. I would recommend applying this with a sponge over a brush, just because with a brush, the silicone in the formula tends to pick up on base products, especially if they've already been powdered. But I can't deny that this is such a great find. It is buildable, it's blendable. It is a bit more sheer than the Westman Atelier. It definitely has a bit more translucency to it, but that just makes it even that more easier to smack on, in my opinion. It's quick, it's easy, it's cheap, it's fun for the whole family. You can just dunk your beauty blender in there, go ham on your face, and it practically blends itself out because of that thin silicone-y consistency. It just glides really nicely when applied with a sponge. So I'm really glad I have this in my collection and that I tried it this year because it is one of my favorite cream bronzers that I have. And then if you're more of a powder bronzer person, which admittedly I usually am, I usually like to do cream contour and then powder bronzer. I have 2 powder bronzers to talk about, and the first is my ultimate holy grail. I have had this for a while, but I really fell in love with it this year, as you can tell by the amount of pan that I have hit on this baby. And this is the Maybelline City Bronzer in the shade C1 or 100. It's one of the two. I've already talked about this in 2 videos and countless Instagram posts already, so I will make this quick, but it blends itself. I swear. I usually use this brush here, this big old brush, to apply it. It's a bit more tapered, but it's very wide, and I will just dunk my brush in there and throw it on like that, and it just blends itself. In my skin tone, this particular shade is super flattering because it's this perfect like beige to slightly golden undertone that hits that really believable tan shade on my skin. There's nothing red and there's nothing orange about it at all. It does have a matte finish, but I do find it differs from a lot of other matte finish bronzers at the drugstore in its pigment level. It's a bit more sheer and buildable, and you're noticing a trend with these cheek products. I really like them to be sheer, buildable. I want to be able to control the pigment level on them. It always just looks like this veil of sun-kissed warmth. It never ends up looking like you applied the wrong shade of powder foundation down your cheeks and neck. And it never gets caught on any wet spots that my foundation maybe hasn't like dried all the way yet, or I'm wearing a cream blush or my cream contour. It never gets caught on that and gums up. So yes, this is my holy grail bronzer. I will repurchase it when I run out, and I feel like me watching the pan grow on this bronzer as I use it is the closest that I will personally get to the feeling of parenthood. And then my other favorite powder bronzer, I like for a lot of the same reasons, but it is quite a different product because sometimes you just want a shimmery bronzer. This is the Revlon SkinLights Prismatic Bronzer in Sunlit Glow 110. So this is a shimmery powder bronzer, and I prefer this to a shimmery cream bronzer because the shimmery cream bronzers just tend to reflect weirdly because they have that shimmer in the formula, but then they also have generally like a gloss kind of texture to them. So it tends to reflect weirdly on my underneath my cheekbones, and it also just gets like sparkle goo caught in my sideburns, which is kind of nasty looking. But a shimmery powder bronzer, this doesn't reflect in the same way. It just gives a really nice glow. So this doesn't reflect weird. It has no sparkle or glitter in it. It just glows, and it's this perfect gelée texture of a powder that ends up feeling really luxurious. This is super impressive and a hidden gem, I must say. We are back for a third sitting. However, it is the same day as the second sitting, just many hours later. So we don't get a costume change. We just get me in my makeup that I tried to touch up, but might have just ended up fucking up. So we're gonna be kind about my appearance for the rest of this video. I am excited though, because this is the whole reason I made this video. I wanted to talk to you about my favorite blushes. And they're all cream, baby. I just checked. I did also wear my fair share of powder blushes this year, but all of my favorite powder blushes are discontinued. Henceforth, we are going to talk about creams and liquids. Creams and liquids. It's about to get real wet up in here. I don't like myself sometimes. I'm looking down at my notes and I just have in bold 28-point font, remember to describe shades. So we'll see if I remember. So we're going to start with what was hands down my absolute most used blush of 2022, and that is the Melt Cosmetics Cream Blushlight in the shade Honey Thief. I actually used this in my Naked Honey Get Ready With Me if you want to see it in action, but whoo boy, this is a beauty. The texture is so thin yet emollient. It spreads really evenly. It's just not one of those thick, glossy cream blushes. It doesn't feel like you're applying Vaseline to your face. Oh yeah, it just completely just melts to the touch of your... Oh. It's funny. Yes, it melts at the touch of your finger, and the brand is called Melt Cosmetics. It's very funny, Ludo. Anyways, this is just such a beautiful cream blush, and it's that perfect coral that doesn't lean too red on me. A lot of corals give me that sunburnt look. This gives me a flushed look without going into sunburn territory. It's just this soft peachy pink. There's no added shimmer to it or anything. It just is so weightless feeling on the face, and it looks like it's coming from within. That's what this formula does best. It just looks like you are beaming from within. Additionally, because of how lightweight the formula is, I can layer this with either a powder or a cream blush, or even just some translucent setting powder, and it won't get gummy. It won't stick to anything. This will just go under or over top of any product and glide perfectly. So the shade is super flattering on me, pairs really well with all the colors that I like to wear. And then that combined with this amazing, amazing formula. Melt really nailed this formula. I just need them to come out with more shades of this. I have my eye on a couple of different shades that I want to pick up soon, but they tend to stick to pinks, peaches, and oranges, and I'm gonna need this in every color of the rainbow. So the Melt Cream Blushlight in Honey Thief was my most worn cream blush, and for the rest of these, I'm gonna go in no particular order. Just know that I love them all. And also know that the packaging on just about all of them looks pretty banged up and disgusting, and that's because I've used the heck out of them. This is the M Cosmetics Color Serum Blush Drops in the shade Venetian Rose. And I believe they have reformulated these or repackaged them. This is the old version though. So this is the first product I've ever tried from M Cosmetics. I do have one other product, and that is their lip cushion tinted balm lipstick thing, also in the shade Venetian Rose. I actually find the blush drops to be a bit warmer toned than the lip, even though they are supposed to be in the same shade. So that's just something to note. It could just be how they translate on my skin on my cheeks versus my lips though. Still, these are super pretty. They're just this like medium rose shade that leans a little bit warm on me, and it makes my cheeks look nice and flushed. For the finish, they're about the dewiest thing I can get away with wearing on my cheeks right now. They definitely suited me better when I was a bit more dry to combo, but they're still really, really nice, and I am wearing them today, just caked in layers of powder by this point. They stay a little bit liquidy, serumy feeling. It's this nice, like, velvety dry down that they have, but they do stay movable. Like, my bangs don't get stuck to this in the wind, but I also wouldn't necessarily pick up my cat and carry her around, or things might get a little hairy, if you know what I mean. This product gives my cheeks the approximate color and finish of a Schneider's hot dog that has been left on the kitchen counter for about 20 minutes. And sometimes that is truly, without a hint of irony, exactly what I am going for. The next blush I have to talk about, I've got 3 shades of this formula. This is the Tower 28 Beach Please Tint. I wore the bejesus out of these, all 3 shades. Sometimes I had all 3 shades on my face at once. Usually I was wearing 2. Oh, this one looks really gross. This is the first shade I bought. This is Magic Hour, and it's all nasty because I wear it a lot. So this is Magic Hour. It's a standard pinky beige, and on my light skin tone, it comes across as a pinky nude. Then I purchased Power Hour, which is more intense, and I love this shade. It's just a perfect burnt orange. Actually, you know that lipstick from Revlon that everybody loves, Toast of New York? It's like a warm, rusty red brown. That's what this reminds me of. It's like the really pigmented cream blush form of that. So Power Hour was definitely my most worn shade out of the 3 Tower 28 blushes that I have. It just tended to go with just about everything. For one, it goes with my eyes. The warmer, rustier tones in it really pull the blue out of my eyes. But it just wanted to complement basically anything I put on them. It pairs really well with green. It pairs really well with like a deep purple. It pairs well with blue, and warm tones, of course, do like a really nice monochromatic look. It just paired really well with any jewel tone, and the two would play off of each other and make everything look so nice and rich. And then we have my most recent edition. I bought this one in the late summer, early fall, and this is Office Hours. They say that this is supposed to be a cooler toned mauve. I would disagree there. To me, this reads more of just a straight down the middle rose. It maybe leans a little bit cool, but there's nothing really like dusty or desaturated about it. Regardless, it is still a gorgeous shade, and I have worn it tons since I've purchased it. Layered, on its own, mixed with Magic Hour. The possibilities are endless. So what I really love about this blush is that it is kind of like a dewy, sticky cream blush, but it's got pigment to it. It's not just one of those like tinted Vaseline products that really don't tend to work on my skin. I don't have to apply a lot of this to get the pigment level that I want, and it adds a really nice, like, juicy level of shine to the top of my cheeks. I wear this more when I know I'm gonna have like a shorter makeup day, or I'm just applying makeup for camera, like for Instagram and stuff like that. I don't tend to chance wearing this out, but I didn't go to a lot of places this year. I ended up just doing a lot of makeup for Instagram, and these look gorgeous on camera. Next, we have another liquid blush. I guess we're just bouncing back and forth between creams and liquids. This is the Danessa Myricks Vision Flush, and this is actually advertised as kind of like a lip and cheek product, or lip, cheeks, eyes, do whatever you want with it, artist pigment sort of thing, because Danessa Myricks is very geared towards working makeup artists. I would have loved to have a bunch of her stuff in my kit when I was working. Her formulas are very agreeable to what you want them to do. They're very manipulable. So this is the shade Ballet Slippers, and that name would lead you to believe that it would be like a soft pink, but it's actually more of like a rusty peach, I would say. And the formula is really nice and thin. It actually kind of reminds me of the Melt Cream Blushlight because it's thin and a little bit oily. It spreads really far if you want it to, but you can also build it up. It's not just going to sheer out and completely wash out and wash away. So this saw a lot of use. It's another blush that I used a lot for layering because of its lightweight texture. I wore this a lot in the fall because of that nice like rusty undertone. And then I picked up this shade initially, Ballet Slippers, because it was the only one available at my local Sephora that wasn't like a shimmery shade. But she has a ton of other shades in this. There's like a deep true indigo. There's like a cherry, like a black cherry tone. There's this beautiful orange, like a bright neon orange that I got to swatch at another Sephora in Toronto, and ooh, baby, I want it. They're not even that expensive, so I don't know why I haven't bit the bullet yet, but I will be picking up more of these in 2023. Mark my words. This next blush is just a good, reliable failsafe, a sleeper hit, if you will. I was jonesing on this hard for my work days, and this is the Rare Beauty Stay Vulnerable Melting Cream Blush in the shade Nearly Neutral. I also have this in the shade Nearly Mauve, but I wore Nearly Neutral a significant amount more than that other one, so we're going to talk about Nearly Neutral. Simply put, this is just what I was wearing to work like 75% of the time during the start of the year. It's another really thin formula. You're seeing a trend here. Those Tower 28 ones are the outlier. The rest of the formulas that I like on a cream blush tend to be pretty thin and almost less emollient. This one actually isn't really radiant or dewy at all. It's more slippy and silicone-y. The one thing about the Stay Vulnerable Melting Cream Blush formula is that it doesn't really like to be built up on itself, so your one layer, that's about as much as you're gonna get. So you can sit there and fuss and play with this. You can layer it until the cows come home, but it's never gonna look any more pigmented than the first layer you put down. So if you have a skin tone that is anywhere near similar to mine, and you are looking for a blush that is like pretty and flattering and goes with everything, and it's also impossible to screw up and over apply, this might be your guy. And then my last blushes are kind of an honorable mention because while I didn't wear them as much as these other ones, I did have tons of fun playing with them. These are the Quo Featherweight Cream blushes, and they come in so many shades. They come in light shades, really deep shades, really bright shades. They have pretty much anything you'd ever want. And then if they don't have what you want, they mix really nicely together, so you can make what you want. You'll notice that the packaging on these is meant to call back to the Glossier Cloud Paints. These are not a formula dupe for the Cloud Paints. They are just as mixable, but they are a little less pigmented and they're more emollient. This formula is almost like you took 3 parts Glossier Cloud Paint, which is this very thin, pigmented, spreadable paint-like product, and then added 1 part like a moisturizing primer. These are dewy and then they dry down after a couple hours. I find they apply nicely with a brush or a sponge. So I've got 3 shades here. I've got Dreamy, which is this bright coral, Pure, which is like this deeper desaturated berry in the tube and comes across as more true purple berry, like a blackberry tint on the skin. And then there's Pure, which is this nice medium rosy brown. And it's like a nudie rosy brown that is still deep enough to show up on some medium skin tones. And then they actually do have some deeper browns in this range, like a nude blush for deeper skin tones. And I find that to be impressive. It shouldn't be impressive. It should be something that comes out with every blush launch. But I see so many brands launching like 4 blush shades. And then these companies are like, yeah, of course we have a diverse shade range. We have a shade for everybody, silly. We've got a peach, a pink, and a nude for white people. And then we've got a berry for everybody else. So whenever I see a Black-owned brand coming out with a beautifully saturated blush range suited to medium to deep skin tones, and then I see some #PalePrincess going off in the trend mood comments, well, they should cater to all skin tones. None of these are light enough for me. Can it, Sally? White bitches have been wearing blushes for centuries. I'm sure we can find you something. And I'm sure if my channel were any bigger, people would be telling me to keep politics out of it. Just focus on the makeup. I'm trans, which means I was born without a dick, not a heart. This is the Strikadelic Clown Car and nobody gets left behind. Well, that's all my blushes, so I guess that brings us to highlighter. I've only got 2. And the first one is this little single pan here from M Cosmetics. Not M Cosmetics, M Cosmetics. So M Cosmetics is an indie brand out of Southern Ontario, and I have a lot of their eyeshadows, and then I picked up one of their highlighters, and I really, really like it. This is in the shade Peach Silk. And 2022, I guess, is the year I just really decided that peach flatters my skin tone supremely in a way that no other shade can. My favorite brow bone highlight, which is the shade Flicker from the brand Cleona Cosmetics, is peach. It's the only indie shadow I've ever hit pan on. And then this is just this beautiful peach shine backed with like almost a vanilla pigment that matches my skin tone pretty closely. So all you get is that nice luminescent peach with a bit of satin underneath it. It's just really, really beautiful. It's not super metallic and there's no glitter to it, but it gives this very lit from within quality that I love. And then my last product of the video is my full glam highlight of choice. This is the Kaleidos Space Age highlighter in the shade Ray Rider. And Kaleidos has a lot of these highlighters in a lot of like funky multi-chromes. They've got like a pink to silver to green one. They've got a really cool blue one that I want to try. But this one, Ray Rider, is just really nice and neutral, but not too light. It just looks really at home on my skin tone. It's got a bit of a silver sheen on top of that champagne backing, which adds to that like wet look glam effect. But I don't find it ever really looks chunky on me. It's still a really nice finely milled sparkle, but it definitely adds a bit more pizzazz to your face. And I find that this highlighter just looks better and better as you wear it throughout the day. This is the highlighter that I will always wear and then catch myself in the mirror later and go like, hey, how are you doing, sexy? So those were all of my complexion favorites for 2022. A couple are still lurking in that discontinued pile, but the Fallen Angels video will be coming at a later date, and the eyes and lips video will be coming soon too. My next video is going to be my top 10 most worn fragrances of 2022, and I am so excited for that video. And if you are excited for any of those videos, make sure you're subscribed. Keep an eye out in your subscription feed for those bad boys. Leave this video a like if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments what your favorite blush was of 2022. I don't care if it's discontinued. I would like to know for research purposes. And again, I just want to thank you guys for all of the love I've been receiving, especially in the comments. You guys are the freaking sweetest. And until I hit 800 subscribers, I can't actually post on like a community tab to keep you guys updated. So make sure you follow me over on my Instagram, because I'll be posting any updates about videos and scheduling and stuff over there on my stories. So my Instagram is Strikeadelic, just like this channel. I just hit 1,000 followers over there. Heck yeah. And I also have a website now, so that's strikeadelic.ca. And you'll be able to find my Instagram, my TikTok, everything over there, as well as any active affiliate or discount affiliate codes that I have with brands over there. We are getting so close to 2023, you guys, and I hope to have more content up by the end of the year. But if I don't get a chance to, I just want to say I hope that every one of you has amazing holidays and a really great New Year's Eve. Don't wake up with too bad of a hangover. And I'm just really excited to keep making content in 2023 for all of you, because you're the sweetest. Have a great one, you guys. Ludo out.
There's more where that came from, so go ahead and subscribe if you want to see more of whatever the heck that was.